Let's start talking about what's going on in the heart, right? So during the past decade, convincing evidence has accumulated that conquering heart disease is not simply a matter of driving serum cholesterol down. In fact, one half of the people who have had a heart attack have normal cholesterol levels. And now we know that low cholesterol is being associated with a significant risk of early cognitive decline. So what are we thinking relative to heart health? So if it's not that whole cholesterol thing, and certainly we've been beating this drum for a very long time now, the thing is inflammation. Inflammation of the capillaries. That's where we really want to look at how we can improve our heart health. And at the same time, that really moves across the entire body. So one of the most important studies that they have ever done around heart health has been around the Mediterranean diet. So what is the Mediterranean diet? Well, you may ask that question, and you may think, well, I understand that the Mediterranean diet is maybe Italy, maybe it's France, maybe it's Portugal. Sometimes Portugal doesn't even come into that equation. But really, it's about 16 different countries. It encompasses 16 different countries. So we need to remember that North Africa is also part of the Mediterranean too. So there's a lot of differences in the diet, actually. So the Mediterranean diet isn't as simple as, oh, let's just hop onto the Mediterranean diet. But there are so many different variations of the Mediterranean diet. But the health benefits have been quite remarkable as it relates to the heart. So what are the health benefits, and what are they eating that's so different to what we eat? Well, it's very high in vegetables, fruits, olive oil, all the healthy fats, legumes, whole grains, seafood, occasionally red meat, and red wine, and very, very low in sugar. Fruit is the main dessert, other than sweet things consumed. So if you've been to Italy or you've been to Greece, or you've been to any of those Mediterranean countries, fruit, sliced fruit, is normally the option for dessert. But there's an issue around the Mediterranean diet. A lot of times whole grains can be the problem. And again, if we think about the Mediterranean diet, that's one of the things that's touted quite often. So in the way that we look at the Mediterranean diet is a difference. So it's a flexible Mediterranean diet. It's taking out the foods that can promote inflammation. So sugar's already taken out of there. But we want to watch the grains. We know that the grains are high in glycemic level, and we're going to get into that in a short while. And they can raise your blood sugar, and they can promote inflammation. So it's the grains that we really want to be quite careful of. And particularly the gluten grains, right? So having the baguette and the breads is probably not such a great idea, and not the healthy part of the Mediterranean diet. So when they look at the the other thing I want to mention is the amount of red wine consumed. It always surprises me that when I'm in France, Paris, people are not guzzling down bottles and bottles of red wine in one sitting. They may have 2 glasses. So its quantity plays a huge role in this too. And it's not considered part of the Mediterranean diet, but portion. So whether it be glasses and glasses of red wine or just the size, the quantity of the food we eat makes a huge difference too. Even though that might be healthy foods, it takes enormous amount of energy and function in the body to digest large quantities of food. So portions play a role in this too. So then we look at the glycemic index and the glycemic load. And anytime you look at cardiovascular or a heart health diet, they're going to be saying low glycemic index. They normally say low glycemic index, and they forget about the glycemic load. So what is the glycemic index? It's really a way to rank carbohydrates. And the rank or the scale is from 0 to 100. And it's based on the extent to which the carbohydrates in the food will increase your fasting blood sugar. And here's the nut. In healthy people. So it's the glycemic index and how it will increase your fasting blood sugar. So the lower the glycemic index number is, the lower the food's impact on blood sugar. Now, that's all very interesting, but who knows what the glycemic index is? And it means is that every time you eat something, you have to run to a chart and say, well, what's the glycemic index of that? And so how realistic and functional is that? Not at all, right? Then there's the glycemic load. So the glycemic load means, and it's based on the glycemic index, but it takes into account the amount of carbohydrates consumed in that specific serving. So let's take this, for example. Watermelon has a glycemic index of 72, which is considered really high. But no one I know can sit down and eat and consume an entire watermelon. So it's how much of that watermelon will raise your blood sugar. So if that's the glycemic index, it's 72, and 2 cups would probably give you a glycemic index, a glycemic load score of something about 6. And how that works is normally a low glycemic index is going to be 54 or less, medium is 55 to 69, and high is 70 or more. So then when we look at glycemic load, it's going to be from 0 to 11 is low, 0 to 10 rather, and then from 11 to 20 is medium, and then anything above 20 is going to be high. Again, interesting information, but how am I going to live my life eating those kinds of foods, right? So really the glycemic load is the portion, and then the glycemic index is the actual value. So when we're looking at that, interesting as it may be, it's just not something that you're able to do each day. So we want to be eating the foods that have lots of fiber because they're not going to raise our blood sugar that much. So going back to what is really interesting about the Mediterranean diet is, one, it has a high amount of olive oil, extra virgin olive oil. It has lots and lots of vegetables. If you've ever been to the Mediterranean in the summer and the tomatoes are out, I absolutely adore them. Sliced tomatoes with olive oil, maybe a little bit of balsamic or not, and just some salt and maybe some chopped up herbs like some basil. And they are so incredible. I cannot even compare them to anywhere else in the world. They are so delicious, my favorite things. And then the fruit replaces the sweet dessert, something like a sliced peach or nectarines or apricots or figs, my favorite thing. Seafood, lots of seafood on the Mediterranean, right? And then legumes. So there are a lot of countries that use lots of lentils and different types of beans. And we're thinking about northern Africa, but France and Italy use quite a substantial amount of legumes too. And what's good about the legumes, it's high in fiber and it controls the blood sugar. So the glycemic load of that is going to be surprisingly low. Poultry, they use some poultry, and then some red meat. Not a lot of red meat. It's not a major big emphasis. The whole grains, of course, that's going to be things like some millet, or it's going to be bulgur, or it's going to be tabbouleh, those kinds of things. But we want to make sure that if you're going to eat those, it should be gluten-free. Some red wine, but then high fiber. So their foods are also really high fiber. And so when we talk about fiber is really important from a cardiovascular point of view. And we find fiber pretty much in most plant-based foods: vegetables, whole grains, fruits, legumes, nuts, and seeds. And fiber is a carbohydrate, but it's a carbohydrate that the body is unable to digest. And it gives you that feeling of fullness. It's very low in calories, and it has many benefits. And there are 2 types of fiber. There's insoluble fiber and there's soluble. So insoluble fiber can be found. It's in the bran. It's the outer coat of vegetables and whole grains. And it's a fiber that acts like a bulky inner broom, and it sweeps out all the stuff from the intestines. And it also creates motility, so things that move through the body, so motility and movement. So when you think about fiber like that, you're probably thinking about bran. Now, I'm going to tell you, don't eat bran for the sake of fiber because it's kind of like a scouring brush, and it's not great. No cereal is great. Then we start to look at soluble fiber. So soluble fiber attracts water and swells, and then it creates that sort of gel-like mass. So remember when we're thinking about things like those chia puddings? It's a perfect example, or flax seeds. Perfect example. They attract water. Psyllium husks as well. So the thing about soluble fiber, it slows digestion. It also slows the release of glucose from food into the bloodstream. And the thing about fiber, it traps toxins, and then it can also help remove cholesterol in the same way. So it traps the toxins, it traps the cholesterol and any other kinds of fat, and helps to carry them out through the stool. The thing about fiber, too, it also provides food for the healthy bacteria, which convert that fiber into short-chain fatty acid. And anytime I'm reading a Boston Heart Health lab result, and I'm seeing absorption of cholesterol through the gut, we make most of the cholesterol we make in our liver, and then the other 25% we actually absorb through our foods. But if I'm looking at those numbers high in the Boston Heart Lab results, I'm thinking, how much fiber is this person eating? And we've got to up that fiber. And also what's happening with the gut bacteria. So that fiber feeds the gut bacteria, or the gut bacteria rather, ferment that fiber to produce short-chain fatty acids. So if you're thinking about health, you want to start thinking about increasing your fiber to at least 5 grams a day. And that may help with the whole issue around inflammation. So let's talk about fats. So in the past, fats were linked to increased cholesterol and heart disease. And these studies, of course, were done by Ansel Keys, who actually misrepresented the results of the study for his own gain. There was money involved in this, folks. And for so many years, we were eating the bad fats. So we were eating margarines, and we were eating refined carbohydrates. It was pasta, and it was all of that stuff that we now know is not good for us. And on top of that, there were high amounts of sugar. And we can thank this man, Ansel Keys, and I hope you're turning in your grave, Mr. Keys. But this was what changed the American diet into the standard American diet. And the abbreviation for that is the SAD, the SAD diet, which is high refined carbohydrates and high sugar. So when we talk about that, and also, so not only did this affect our cardiovascular system and our hearts, but it also affected all the other parts of our body. So we started to see a major health deterioration, increase in body fat, increased inflammation just generally. But when we talk about the heart, the healthiest fat is going to be olive oil. And why? Because it has those 30 phytochemicals in them. And the phytochemicals, I'm going to get into that very shortly for those that haven't listened, but 30 phytochemicals. And the studies around that is 50 grams a day of olive oil is going to be really beneficial to anyone that has any heart health issues. And 50 grams rather is about 10 teaspoons a day. So the olive oil is extremely, extremely beneficial for us. So let's talk about phytonutrients. If you've been listening to me, you will know that I've been talking about these phytonutrients and phytochemicals for a while now. And most plant foods contain thousands of these compounds. And we have anywhere from 5,000 to 10,000 of these have been identified. But it's suggested that many, many, many more remain unknown. And they work synergistically with each other. So even if we study one phytonutrient, it works with a bunch of others in a specific food. And we need them. we need so much more of them. What they now know is that the average person only eats a small amount of these nutrients every day, less than a teaspoon, which is really tiny compared to with the other aspects of our food. So we want to up those phytochemical nutrients because they're antibacterial, they're antiviral, they're antimicrobial, they turn on our healthy genes, they repair our cells, they reduce inflammation, they support our immune system, they support our heart and cardiovascular system, they're important for the brain, they're important for the liver, they're important for the gut. We need these foods, and we need the entire array of them. The more of those we have, the healthier we're going to be. So here's an example. So when we look at cardiovascular disease or cardiovascular health, we want to make sure we control that blood sugar. Because when it's uncontrolled and we have high spikes of inflammation, we're going to see inflammation in your capillaries too. They will be impacted. So when we look at blood sugar regulation, things like fenugreek seeds, bitter melon, cinnamon, soy, mushrooms, all of those have those phytonutrients in them that control those blood sugar and insulin aspects. If we're looking at reducing LDL, cholesterol, the LDLs, but the oxidation of that, it's what's happening to the cholesterol. Is it being oxidized? That gets to be problematic. So things like lycopene. Lycopene is a phytochemical that we find in tomatoes. We find it in pink and red grapefruits. We find it in watermelon. Again, the olive oil, polyphenols, high. The 30 polyphenols in that's going to help with reducing the oxidation of our LDLs. Green tea has EGCG, really important for that. And then dark chocolate and pomegranate, they all have these polyphenols, these phytochemicals that support your cardiovascular health. From a blood pressure point of view, when we look at phytochemicals, quercetin from onions, the sulfur compounds from garlic, the beta-glucans from mushrooms, the polyphenols from pomegranate juice, and also the theobromine in dark chocolate. These can help to reduce our blood pressure. So you can see the diet we really are gravitating towards is not only for cardiovascular health, but it's for the entire body. So we're looking at starting off with the fats, the extra virgin olive oil, lots and lots of vegetables. We want those phytochemicals. We want the fruit because they have those phytochemicals and nutrients in them too. Seafood, so fish and shellfish, legumes, poultry, red meat. Watch the grains. Everyone overeats on the grains. A little bit of red wine, not overdoing it. And that's what we look at as an anti-inflammatory diet. So what you can start with is cutting the sugar and the refined carbohydrates. That would be the best start that you can make. So that's all for today, folks. So do you have any questions? If you have, unmute and ask those of me.